running for City Council District A.
I sure am.
Awesome. And what's been your exposure to the political scene in New Orleans prior to this?
That's a great question, and one I wish that people would ask more about. So my career for the last 15 years has been in education. I've been teaching middle school social studies in New Orleans public schools. But I began my career in government relations. So when I first graduated from college and came back to New Orleans right after Katrina, I graduated in May of 2008, I started working with a local workforce development program. So it was called the Louisiana Green Corps, or Conservation Corps of Greater New Orleans was the umbrella program. It was an AmeriCorps service-based organization. And really, we were just sort of provided by basically the federal government to nonprofits to help them build capacity. And AmeriCorps vistas exist throughout the country still. I'm not really sure what their funding looks like right now. But, you know, historically, like, this is a kind of a relic program from like the WPA in the 1930s. So I did a year of that because in 2008, not only were we rebuilding from Katrina, but there was also a massive recession underway and I could not find a job. And so I did that, and I'm so grateful for that experience because it ended up, we were teaching youth green job skills at the time, so figuring out how kids around New Orleans could support the rebuilding industry. And then I went from there to the Home Builders Association, actually, and I was there, for lack of a better term, like a lobbyist is what it is. So I spent the first 2 real years of my work experience in my career in local government, in city council meetings, in comprehensive zoning ordinance meetings, in master plan meetings, which I haven't heard a single word about a master plan in our city in probably 15 years. And then also like just sort of advocating for the issues of the construction industry. So that is where I really got my exposure to government, and I will say candidly that I walked away because I did not like the way that government operated. It did not feel good to me to be a part of that particular machine where it felt like the organization I worked for was really paying to have their policies enacted, and it was really mostly about the special interests that they were supporting and not the greater good. And that is why I became a teacher, is because I felt like I wanted to make an impact on the world, and lobbying didn't feel like the right way to do that. And I switched gears, and I have been teaching for 15 years. So that was my background.
Why are you going back to government?
I've always had a passion for policy. It's why I got into that original sort of avenue of work. And as I've taught kids for these last many years how the government is supposed to function, I have been experiencing growing frustration with the fact that nothing I tell them government is supposed to do actually happens. That's a problem for me. And so again, like I feel great about the impact that I've had on the thousands of kids that have come through our community. That's it. Like that's what we are supposed to be built on. We are a community that is represented by the people for the people, and I am a person who has lived my whole life in this community. So yes, I think understanding the ins and outs of government could be helpful if we want government to continue operating the way that it has been. I don't necessarily want that, and I think having outside perspective is valuable, and that is something that I think is probably a lot of people, it resonates with a lot of people. And yes, I can't argue that like it's some of my opponents, like one of my opponents has a lot of experience with specifically budgeting in city council, and that's fine, but I think about the budget as it's allocated and I have concerns. I worry about why we're not allocating funds to code enforcement and permits, and I wonder why we're cutting DPW's their funding, and those are, so again, continuing to do things the same way I don't necessarily think is a perfect benefit for our community.
So how would you address the infrastructure situation on our streets, water mains? My husband, we were driving down State Street, and he was noticing how many parts of the street have been broken up because they had to address a water issue.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say this is wild to me. The Sewerage and Water Board and the Department of Public Works are fully separate entities. I think a lot of people know that, but I don't know that it's really clear to everybody. My 8th graders, we have 3 pages in a book that we use dedicated to how the Sewerage and Water Board is organized. It is wild that we need to teach children throughout Louisiana how like a basic public service is organized, and it's because it is organized in a way that does not make any sense.
Yes, Alex. We can't talk about sewage and water board without talking about Entergy.
Yeah.
And so there's many outages we're experiencing it. Well, maybe not experiencing it now, but there's many outages as well as floodings of street. We are familiar with that. And so, what is something or what tool you'll use to help citizens bring down their bills or to do something about the flooding and drainage issues that particularly hits your district or District A hard?
Yeah. I'll start with Entergy. I would say, as the regulators of our utilities, right, and Entergy is a corporation that we regulate, which is an interesting model. We haven't done a ton of regulating lately. Like, there haven't been as many meetings checking in on Entergy or following up with Entergy as there historically have been, and I don't know why that is for the last 6 months. But I would say a couple of things that other municipalities do that we could implement right away. I'm especially thinking about that outage in May that I think we're all sort of like, it's top of mind. That like we had this weird, like, it wasn't a planned outage, but then all of our power went out. We were all over the place and nobody had any advance warning. So there are communities that when there is an outage, like a sunny day outage for no apparent real reason, there is a penalty, and basically ratepayers get a refund, a rebate on their next bill to reimburse them for the time block that was missed. And it's not like a 1-to-1, like a by minute or a by usage rate. It's just like next month we had this outage. It was inexplicable. It caused a hardship. You're gonna get $30 back on your bill next month. I think that would do it's really simple, and it exists in a lot of places. So like, it's very doable. And I think it would do two things. I think it will give some small measure of relief to people, but also it should discourage Entergy from having disruptions in our power outage. Right now, the power goes out, there's not really a good reason for it, there's no consequence for them, for lack of a better term. What has happened? What has befallen them that is a problem? What do they have to answer for? Nothing at all. We have a meeting, we say, why did this happen? They tell us why it might have happened. Nothing else happens. But I am confident that if there was some policy, even something really simple like that in place, that we would at least get more consistent service on the front in terms of random outages. Now, like, obviously storms, it's trickier, like you have a catastrophic failure because you knocked down, massive transit lines. I still think that there should be some kind of a way to reimburse homeowners in that scenario, but it's kind of a different animal than just a sunny day outage. I also think we should definitely keep net metering. I worry about how much I've heard over the years about like phasing that out, and so for anybody that doesn't, I know you guys probably know, but net metering is when if you've got solar panels, you can sell your energy back to Entergy. That should stay, because that is doing a service to our community. It is preventing us from needing to generate that power elsewhere. We are a sunny city. I would love to see solar options expanded. I would love to see Entergy expanding and diversifying its format for how it is producing power to include more sustainable tools like solar and like wind. But like here, sunny, so it's just sunny most of the time. It's obvious that is like an easy baseline place for us to start. I'd love to see a rebate program, or like we used to have really great solar tax credits. They have declined since the early 2000s. There was a time where you could practically install solar for free. It was utterly wild. It was great. I was not in a position when I was 25 to take advantage of that. But I think bringing back those types of programs and figuring out a way for that to be a part of like a community benefits agreement that Entergy comes up with. Like, how can Entergy give back some of its profits to our community? Could it be for a pool of funding for solar for lower income homeowners? I think that would be great to see, and I don't see a reason that we couldn't have that conversation as regulators. For drainage, for sewage and water, but honestly, I think that this fee structure where like if our streets flood because somebody wasn't there to turn on a pump, and like sewage and water board owes us, right? Like, that's ridiculous. That's an easy fee structure for us to establish. Okay, you're gonna pay everybody in the community X number of dollars on the next monthly bill, or give them that money back in a refund because you couldn't be bothered to staff your facilities appropriately. And like, honestly, we can assume that there might be a massive rainstorm every single day, any day of the week, really from like May until September. So I don't understand why we wouldn't, as an organization, why you wouldn't be planning to have people in place and staffing in those places. And if it is a staffing issue, if you really can't figure out how to staff those facilities, what does your workforce development pipeline look like? How are you bringing younger people in or underemployed people in? What training opportunities are you offering to make sure that there's never a day that somebody's not there to flip the on switch? Or also, better yet, why is it not automated? Why can't a computer turn on the pumps? I know that the system is archaic. It is a century old. I have other like deep concerns about the fact that we are investing millions of dollars in power stations to convert an obsolete form of energy to keep our obsolete pumps running. Like, all of that strikes me as like good money after bad. But I also recognize that it would be billions and billions of dollars for us to replace our existing drainage structure. So if this is what we're working with, where can we bring technology on board to help make things more efficient and to close some of these gaps where it's human error or it's, everybody's car is flooded today? Those seem like problems that we can solve.
Yes.
Okay, you sort of mentioned the idea of bringing younger people into the workforce.
Yeah.
What would you like to, what do you conceive of as a way to get young people coming out of high school jobs and while they're in school, things to keep them off the streets and keep them focused on a future?
Yeah, so I'm a teacher, right? So this is like my bread and butter, right? This is what I care the most about is kids, and especially when I have kids in 8th grade. They're thinking about high school. They're thinking, and they're not really thinking about college. But I've tried to force the ones that I have, at least, my little 75. They have to think about college, because when it is. I try to explain to them, like, we all know as you get older, time feels like it speeds up. But like, those years go by really quickly. And so in 8th grade, when I get kids, we have a financial planning, a career planning, we call it transitions, a next steps of planning course. That's just something that I happen to do in my school that I've sort of created on my own. I would love to see a program like that consistently across all of our schools. And I think that there are systems that could support developing something like that. It's very much a school board question, but I do think, like, even in 8th grade, that's where I start having this conversation with students. And what they should be thinking about is, okay, when I go to high school, I have these 4 years. And in these 4 years, I'm going to get to make some choices about what classes I take. If I'm envisioning a career for myself in the medical professions right now at age 14, maybe I should consider setting up my high school schedule so that I can get an AP biology in, right? And so I do try to at least like start having that conversation with kids. I know high school guidance counselors also have that conversation with kids. But beyond that, New Orleans Public Schools right now, NOLAPS has a program called the Success Hub. And so incorporated into our high schools across the city, there are opportunities for kids to earn professional certifications. So this is not the same as like an associate's degree necessarily. It's not like taking college classes. This is, okay, I'm going to get this industry credential in coding. And while they're working through their coursework in high school, one of their electives or a couple of their electives can be designed to get them the skill set so that when they leave, they graduate with a certificate that says, I have this aptitude, I have this skill. Again, I don't know how well publicized that is. I don't know how much our kids are using that. I would like to see City Council support New Orleans Public Schools in exposing more kids to that kind of programming. And that only works if you've got industry partners. And they're obviously, like, NOLAPS is not the only organization that's doing something like that, right? The New Orleans Career Center is another really great high school level program that is very intentionally connecting kids with industry professionals in which there are high paying jobs.
Are you talking the trades?
Yes, but it's not only, like, I think when we say trades, people get like sort of fixated on building trades, on apprenticeships, and that is part of it, but that's not all. Like, this can also be healthcare trades. This can also be, again, like engineering and software trades. So the New Orleans Career Center is an excellent program. I would like to see us add to that. I would like to see us help support that program in funding. And there are other programs in the city that do workforce development specifically with youth. So I think making sure that as a city council we are in tune with those programs. We are also talking with those programs about what are the industries that you have, sort of like that you're building a workforce for. How can we, on the economic development side of things at City Hall, talk to outside industries, talk to small businesses about what their needs are? How can we start connecting the dots on what our kids want to do and what companies need from a workforce, right? And then that can also, like, workforce development doesn't have to be exclusively kids in high school or college, right? But you mentioned earlier, like, in District A, we have Loyola, and we have Tulane, and we have Delgado, and we have Xavier. Like, we've got a lot of universities. I don't know how much collaboration City Council is doing, or outreach City Council is doing, to connect with those universities on workforce development. And that feels like an easy win for everyone. Just opening the door to a conversation. How can our Office of Economic Development work with our local universities to keep these kids that are getting these advanced degrees? Like, how can we keep them here? What do they need? And then I think beyond that, beyond kids, like, we've got lots of people that could use more training in a different sector. Maybe you started somewhere that is now obsolete because the internet, that is a real thing for people. And so what are our community resources looking like to bring in people who are underemployed or unemployed? How, like, what, I know Job One exists, but, like, how much is Job One working to really provide training to not just any job, but to high-paying jobs, to high-quality jobs? I think that's something that we could do more with. Our economic development team is 2 people right now, and I don't know what 2 people can do with anything. Like, when you're talking about workforce development in high school and workforce development in colleges and working with the underemployed, and also, like, thinking about, like, attracting businesses, that's a lot of work for 2 people in a city this size. Right. We probably need to beef that office up, and I would like to see all of those changes.
You said a lot that triggered some thoughts in my mind, especially around economic development and employment. I'm formerly incarcerated, and I know there's a huge pool of people who have the necessary skills to make it in society, but there are city jobs and jobs within the city where they're not so committed to hiring formerly incarcerated people. They have the skills, they have the trades, they have the training, they have all of these things. So the question I have is, will you be committed into fair chance hiring, vendor requirements, and all of these things? Would you be committed to use those resources or those networks you have to make that pool of people? Because you named several pools, the schools and universities, but you didn't mention the formerly incarcerated.
I have a good friend of mine worked, her dissertation for her PhD was about removing the box that you have to check to say whether or not you're formerly incarcerated, and she did work with that for years, Annie Freitas. And I really love everything that she exposed me to and that she wrote about that issue, and I am here for removing barriers. And what's wild, there's lots of things. I'm a curious person. I have a lot of questions all the time. It's probably what my coworkers would tell you I say most often. And we have such a massive sort of like missing pool of employees from City Hall right now. Like, we can't find people to fix street lights and to be on road work crews. Like, part of the reason that DPW is struggling so much to keep up with its basic repairs is because they can't find, or they say they can't find people to hire. But this, to me, seems like a natural fit, especially for people who are formerly incarcerated. Like, if you're experiencing those roadblocks in the private sector, it is the obligation of the government to help close that gap, to help people build that space back into their resume, to say, not only do I have these skills and these credentials, but also I have this work experience. I have shown up to work every day as I would at any job, and I have, done this specific job in this, city department, and now you've got at least another step on your resume that puts you, that shows employers, oh yeah, this person is trustworthy, reliable, somebody that I should have on my team because they've done good work. And I firmly commit that the city should be hiring from this group of people first as a priority, because number one, we can't seem to hire anybody, and that is a huge problem. But also, it is, I really do think it is part of if we're really serious about restorative justice in our community, there has to be a pathway back to regular life for everybody who's formerly incarcerated. And if we're making that hard, I don't know why we would expect anything to change.
Right. Alrighty. Piggybacking off of that, there's been a lot of effort to take policing out of just the police and incorporate mental health and social work and physical health into it to help people who are I forget the word, but their minds are going out of whack, as opposed to just putting them in jail.
Yeah, I think nobody should we should be keeping as many people out of the Justice Center as humanly possible right now, because clearly things are not going well there.
No, they are not.
I mean, I believe that as a human, but also just for a practicality standpoint, right at this moment, probably not adding anybody else to the Orleans Justice Center is just a good policy. But I'll say, I was able to spend a lot of time with Odyssey House. And Odyssey House is a local agency that does a lot of work in our city for addiction services and mental health services. And they were really helpful in explaining to me some of the overlap between the work that they do and the ways that they think they could expand that collaboration between themselves and the city. And so they're, first of all, running the low barrier shelter, the low barrier homeless shelter. And that is a really great a symbiotic relationship, because a lot of our unhoused population is also experiencing addiction and mental health issues. And so it's great that Odyssey House is there so that they can sort of, first of all, meet people's immediate needs, but then also see, is there something else that we could do to support you in sort of regrouping and getting back on track and sort of re-entering society. And so they've got that. And then Odyssey House also does a lot of addiction services and then mental health services. And I know that over the last year, and I love their program that they've got. They have in-house every single step of a real addiction recovery system, and I would love to be able to help them support and expand their services. A lot of their funding right now is federal government funding for the medical side of their work, which I think is great, and I really hope that they can maintain that. In the instance that there are federal gaps, I would say that it is a responsible choice for the city to allocate funding to support those kinds of services, because they do help keep people out of prison who don't need to be in prison, and also actually actively help them get back on their feet. I think that should always be our main goal.
Right.
Oh, you know that the jail is still under the
consent decree, of course.
And staffing and healthcare lags far behind. What would you do to tie funding to its compliance?
We need to see what the money is being spent on, first and foremost. So right now, the OPSO has its own 20% of its own funding comes from its own millage that was just renewed. But the other 80% is coming from city council. But again, our sheriff's offices are organized by our state government such that they are technically not connected in terms of supervision to our city council. That being the case, it should be incumbent upon the sheriff's office and the city council to reach an agreement to collaborate, even despite the fact that they don't have to, right? So I would say that if we are providing 80% of the funding to the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, if we want to know what's working, if we want to know what's not working, we need a window into that, and right now we don't have that. So I would say the first thing that I would want to do is make sure that, again, there is a formalized agreement whereby the sheriff's office has to report on spending and funding and like what their budget looks like, and then also report on outcomes for that
Right.
budget. So I feel like a lot of the time what I've seen is that city council, gets a request for a budget item. They decide whether or not to fund it, and that's it. There's no follow-up piece on, did this get spent the way that you said you were going to spend it? What are the outcomes? What metrics are you measuring success by? None of those conversations happen consistently. Excuse me. And I would say that needs to change first and foremost. So I would love for us to be able to support the Justice Center in using resources more efficiently to make sure that we are in compliance with that consent decree. And then, but in order to do that, we just have to know where the money's going to begin with. So like, it's a really basic first step. And beyond that, I would be interested in tying together outcomes to funding. Like, if you're not doing these things, we're not going to keep giving you the money to do that, I'm sorry.
So, the other thing I would like, is talking about what your thoughts are on the number of people who are leaving the city and leaving the state, and what you would like to start or enhance to keep them here. And you touched on,
I did.
because I also think one of the arguments that the state has made about getting business here, they say tax incentives, but the data actually shows
It's not tax
an
incentives.
educated workforce. So they can come in and hire people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this ties. I mean, I think this is the reason that I got into this race is because my coworker last fall, who was struggling to afford the taxes and insurance on her house, she and her husband were having trouble making ends meet. On the house they had bought 15 years ago, they didn't buy an unaffordable house. They were pushed out of the housing market. And her husband was offered an excellent job that he just couldn't say no to in Atlanta. And she cried every single day of the rest of the school year from November until May, knowing that she was going to have to leave because she's a New Orleans girl. She grew up in Chalmette. Her mom lived 2 blocks away. This is not a family who wanted to leave New Orleans. This is a family that New Orleans pushed away. And she's making twice as much teaching in Atlanta, which is criminal.
wow.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's there for many people right now. There just isn't an option not to do that, right? There's just not an option to stay. And I would say that there are, like, for me, in my mind, there are like 2 big interconnected issues here. So the first one is that there need to be basic functioning services for anybody, for any company, for any small business to start up here or to move here, right? To decide to set up shop here. And right now we don't have that. Like, our streets are unreliable. Like, I can't imagine trying to present New Orleans to a company and saying, you should definitely settle here, it's going to be awesome. Watch the weather, because sometimes when you're driving home at 4:00, your street, it might be flooded. It's kind of like playing Frogger or getting to my house, but it'll be fine. It's not that often. It's like 3 times a year, no big deal. You think it through and you think, well, no wonder nobody would want to. So I think getting our basics, but also beyond that, people try to come in and set up a business, and they go to safety and permits and they apply for a permit to operate, and then they hear nothing. Crickets. You follow up. Oh, I don't have that application. Let me check with somebody else. You get passed around to 5 different people in the office. Nobody has a record of the application that you submitted. Maybe that person went on maternity leave. It's hard to say. 4 to 6 months later, you might, if you follow up enough and if you know the right people to talk to in the office, then you might get a permit to open your business. That doesn't, no, who's gonna sit through that process,
Right.
So getting safety and permits together, making sure that there is a streamlined process for people who want to start businesses, who want to invest in our community, making sure that, like, our streets don't flood regularly, and you're not gonna, like, bust a tire in a pothole when there's a puddle and you can't quite see how deep it is, right? Like, those are basic things that we need to be able to attract anybody who's just driving around thinking about New Orleans. And the other side of it is absolutely our workforce, and just really making sure that we are being strategic about how we are training our current residents for the jobs that are going to be in high demand. And I think to some extent, like, I talk to kids all day long, and 8 out of 10 kids will tell me, because I ask them what they want to be. And they tell me an entrepreneur. and what they mean is a TikTok influencer. And like so I think finding ways to direct kids to the whole world of possibilities is important, because like they see people who get rich quick or who make a lot of money doing a very niche thing, and they think like, I want that. And I'm like, first of all, I don't ever want to be an entrepreneur as long as I live. I think there's nothing more horrifying than that idea. But like I do talk to kids a lot about this, and like I've tried to get in their brains. And for a while, kids would be like, I'm gonna be an Uber driver. That was like at the very front end of Uber, and I was like, I feel like you should think bigger. Like you can do more than be an Uber driver. Like, and I was like, also self-driving cars, those are gonna be a thing. So don't just think about the next 3 years. Think about a 50-year career. Like what are you? Nobody's gonna be driving Ubers in California. Nobody's driving Ubers because they have Waymos and they drive themselves, right? Like that's what the reality is. So I think the two pieces of getting our infrastructure, like a basic house in order, and then also really starting to work on making sure that our high schools and our universities and the businesses that we want to attract here are all aligned. Those are the things that I see as the most important for bringing new jobs to New Orleans.
Yes, thank you for that.
No, of course.
In New Orleans or here in Louisiana, you're a lifelong resident. You familiar with state exemptions, with ICE cooperation mandates, and all of these things that rub us the wrong way. But how would you defend the home rule and uphold our welcoming city practices while keeping residents safe?
So again, it's so scary to me as a social studies teacher who teaches kids about different levels of government and how they are supposed to interact and how they are not supposed to interact, to see what's happening in the state happening right now, because it's such a clear overreach. I think honestly the first line of defense is working closely with our legislative delegation from New Orleans to remind our neighboring parishes and the people who might be inclined to try to take some of our home rule control away from us, that like, if you can do it to us, we can do it to you, or somebody else can. And I think just the reminder that like, you're changing a law that you would not want changed for yourself, and you really need to think long term about the implications of that down the road should you run into a similar situation. If you're on the wrong side of the aisle one day yourself, what does it look like that you try to take this kind of power, that you set the precedent to do that? So I think that's an important conversation for us to continue keeping open in terms of our autonomy and our ability to govern ourselves. I think it is really important for us to maintain a safe space in New Orleans. Clearly, our community wants that for everyone. And I think, for example, with ICE cooperation in particular, we are under a federal consent decree that says that we cannot cooperate with ICE, and the state of Louisiana has decided, no, I think we should. And there's some gray area there as to who gets to win out, and we're going to err on the side of the federal consent decree that says, nope, absolutely not. And that feels just fine to me. And I think that that is an important line for us to draw for ourselves, that like, you can make this law, but again, like, this is a federal versus a state issue, and the federal government supersedes. So it's just, and I do think also just making sure that we are being really careful about the types of technology we are allowing ourselves to use. I know facial recognition technology exists, and like, it is really great when I am coming home from a trip and I don't have to spend a million years in the TSA line, like, yay, facial recognition technology, like, here I am, take my picture. But we need to have some serious guardrails in place for how we're allowing that technology to be used for regular residents, and how we're storing that data, and when we're getting rid of that data, and what agency is collecting that data, and are we being mindful of the biases that are associated with that data, especially for Black and brown people, where there's just like lots of research that shows that there are problematic biases and it's just not as accurate. Those are issues that we need to, I think, get a handle on the front end. I feel like a lot of technology the last many years, it's been coming so quickly, people are reacting to it and not being proactive about it. And I think this is a place where we should be proactive in, before we like launch ourselves into the wide world of AI and facial recognition, the guardrails should already exist. We
Right.
should not be putting the guardrails in on the back end once we realize it's been a disaster.
Right.
So I'm very interested in policies that think ahead of issues like that, and before we decide to use those types of resources, we should really think about community impacts and what we are and are not willing to
To
sacrifice for those technologies.
The only question I would like to add is, how do we cope with the insurance situation in our city?
Yeah, I mean, that's my
Another hour, but-
Yeah, no. I mean, I will say, like, again, on our bill, our monthly mortgage bill right now, right? Like, our mortgage and interest is lower than our taxes and our insurance, and that feels backwards. That doesn't feel like it's the right order of things. I don't have a ton of confidence in the state of Louisiana to get the legislation right to make changes on our insurance companies, but I do strongly believe that we should be using resources like the Affordable Housing Fund that we have, allocated 5% of our budget to now in the city of New Orleans in perpetuity. Like, we should be thinking about how can we take this money and get it to homeowners to make adjustments to their homes to lower their costs, and like rental property, like our landlords too, because they just pass those costs on to renters. So making sure that we are being intentional and again proactive about how are we supporting people in retrofitting their homes to include fortified roofs. How are we being proactive about creating sustainable infrastructure in our communities that will prevent large-scale flooding? Like, obviously, Sewage and Water Board is the 100-year-old system is only going to get us so far. Like, it's just never going to be enough anymore. We need to start thinking about what else can we do. Like, where can we put more cypress trees because they suck up a whole lot of water? Where can we put more community gardens? Like, and I think I've said this a few times. When I was 13, also an 8th grader, my mom didn't know what to do with me during the summer, right? Because you're a little too old for summer camp and you're not quite old enough for a summer job. And she found this program. It was a local program called Summer of Service. And basically my mom and dad paid $25 a week for me to be put to work by the city of New Orleans. And it was definitely like straight hard labor. Like, we were going to neighborhoods, we would be on a school bus, we got off the school bus, we would come up to a vacant lot. It was overgrown, it was like out of control, and we would spend all day pulling all the weeds, clearing all the debris, throwing things away, building little garden structure. I mean, this was in 2001, probably 2001. Like, that's the summer that I did summer. I did it 2 summers in a row. My mom loved that. Loved it. She was like, this is great. This is the greatest thing that could have ever happened to my children. She sent me and my brother off. We were both like 12, 13. And for 2 summers, we did that work. So we were taking blighted property. I'm sure, in retrospect, I'm like, was that Nora? Who were we working for? But we were out there in the community as kids, a bunch of kids, and we were just doing service work to convert blight to something a little functional for the neighborhood. And I am a strong advocate. I do also have fond memories of that work. Fond. And it sounds crazy because, you tell any 13-year-old that they're going to do that, and I guarantee you're going to get some pushback. But I had 2 great summers doing that kind of work. And I would love for us to be able to think creatively about those types of activities and programs, like ways for us to get young people, so you were talked earlier about like how do we keep kids out of trouble. Somebody asked that question. First of all, NORD programming, obviously, but not just summer programming, like all the time programming, after school programming, and not just sports, also coding and dance and music and art, right? Like, we should be creating a lot of programs for a lot of different interests at a lot of different age levels, and that's something that the city can do, they should do. It's going to save us a lot of money in the long run, honestly, in terms of like kids staying out of trouble, like not being bored and trying to figure out how they're going to spend their time. But I do think like some kind of a system, I have no idea who was behind that when I was a child, but like what a great experience that I still think about a lot today. It shaped a lot of the service work that I have been committed to for most of my life. And like that's a way for us to address a community problem, to come up with a sustainable solution, to get kids out of, like keep kids busy and out of trouble, like
and off their phones.
And out in the world, right? Like creative problem solving. And I think that's what I have to offer. And I would love to be able to share those ideas with our community.
Well, thank you for that. appreciate you spending time with us. Are there any final thoughts you would like to say to the people in District 8?
Just, you know, I really do love the district. I grew up in Gentilly, and then we moved to Lakeview. I went to school in Lakeview my whole life. I teach in Lakeview. I live in Mid-City. I've taught in Mid-City. I feel a really deep connection to this district and also all of New Orleans. And I want what's best for my daughters, for all the kids that I've taught, and for all of my friends and neighbors and family members. And I just hope that everyone will consider supporting me this October.
And your ballot number is?
Is number 36. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.